I sat in my office, the hum of computers and the occasional tap of keyboards surrounding me as I stared at the latest product prototype. Everything was going according to plan. The company was thriving and I had just wrapped up another successful product launch. My mind, however, kept drifting to something more personal: Veronica. She was my rock, my partner in every sense of the word. I remembered when we first met at a tech conference years ago. Her intelligence, her drive, and that fire in her eyes drew me in instantly. We were both ambitious, both hungry for success, and together we seemed unstoppable. Over time, I found myself not only in love with her but also with the life we had built together. Veronica was the head of marketing at our company, a role she excelled in with the same intensity she brought to everything else. Together, we had formed the perfect power couple, at least from the outside. No one could have imagined that beneath our success, something was brewing, a storm I had no way of seeing coming. That evening, as I settled into my usual routine of checking emails before dinner, I received an alert. A message that would change everything. I clicked on the subject line, which seemed innocuous enough, just an internal email with the usual updates. As I opened the message, however, my heart skipped a beat. It was an email thread between Veronica and Adam, a colleague and close friend of mine. Adam had been my confidant for years, my right hand on countless projects. We had worked late nights together, shared successes, and faced challenges as a team. But this email? It shattered everything. The message was clear, and the implications were even clearer. Veronica and Adam had been having an affair. But that wasn't what hurt the most. It was what they were planning. They had orchestrated an entire scheme to undermine me, manipulating the company's resources, slowly pushing me out of key projects, and working behind the scenes to position themselves for a takeover. I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. How could this happen? How could the people I trusted the most, the ones I had shared my life with, betray me so completely? I read the emails over and over again, my mind struggling to process the reality of what was happening. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, my emotions swirling between disbelief, rage, and deep, unrelenting pain. Veronica had always been ambitious, but I never imagined she would go this far. Adam, my friend, was no better. I felt like a fool. They had been plotting against me for months, perhaps longer. Everything I had worked for, everything I thought we had built together, was suddenly a lie. I stood up, pacing the room as anger started to take hold. I couldn't let this go. I couldn't let them win. But what could I do? As I stood by the window, staring out at the city skyline, the weight of betrayal pressed down on me. I had always been someone who believed in doing things the right way: hard work, integrity, and perseverance. But now, faced with this betrayal, I realized I had to fight back, not just for my career but for my own sanity. What they didn't know was that I wasn't just a product manager. I was a strategist, and if they thought they could outsmart me, they were wrong. I had one advantage: my knowledge of the company, its systems, and its inner workings. I knew exactly how to turn the tables, and I was going to make sure they paid for what they had done. I was no longer the naive man who believed in the good in people. I was a man on a mission. And soon, they would learn just how dangerous it was to betray someone who had nothing left to lose. It was time to make my move. The night felt long as I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the screen of my laptop. The silence around me was deafening, but my mind raced with thoughts of how to get even. The betrayal was raw, but the fire within me kept me focused. Veronica and Adam thought they could ruin me, but they underestimated the lengths I would go to. I wasn't going to sit idly by and let my world come crashing down. I had the knowledge, the skills, and the resources to fight back. All I needed was a plan, something clever, something they wouldn't see coming. My eyes scanned the documents and internal memos from the company I had once trusted. I knew every corner of the organization, every weakness in its systems, and every vulnerability in its processes. It was a labyrinth of data and files, and I was about to navigate it like a chess player setting up his pieces for a final, decisive move. I pulled up the files I had gathered over the past few weeks: email threads, internal communications, and project updates. Slowly, I began to piece together the full scope of what Veronica and Adam had been plotting. They were meticulous in their efforts, covering their tracks with care. But I was better at this than they realized. The technology that powered the company was my domain, and if anyone could exploit a loophole, it was me. I started with the company's internal database, something no one thought could be breached. It was my expertise after all. I had designed many of the systems in place, and I knew exactly where the flaws were. I took a deep breath and began working. The system was encrypted, but not perfectly. There was a small vulnerability in the way access permissions were managed, a gap that had been overlooked in the security protocols. It wasn't much, but it was all I needed. I wrote a script, a small but powerful tool, to give me access to the files that had been manipulated, files that would expose everything Veronica and Adam had done. As I navigated through the system, I found what I was looking for. There it was, a series of unauthorized transfers of resources and project allocations, all marked under false pretenses. Adam had moved key assets from my department to his own, using the guise of cross-department collaboration. Veronica, meanwhile, had been the one pulling the strings, signing off on decisions that undermined my work. The evidence was damning. But it wasn't enough just to have the evidence. I needed to make sure the world saw it. I had to ensure that this information would reach the right people, the ones who could bring them down. The company's leadership, the media, the shareholders. I had to expose them all. That's when the idea hit me. I had access to a private internal communication platform, a tool that allowed direct contact with the executive team. I could send the files anonymously. I could ensure that they couldn't trace the leak back to me. No one would know who was behind the exposé, but the damage would be catastrophic. I hesitated for a moment, staring at the screen. This wasn't just a matter of getting revenge. This was about justice, about showing the world what they had done. The years I had spent building my reputation, my career, my company, none of it had mattered to Veronica and Adam. Now it was my turn to make them pay. I clicked send. The email went out to the company's top executives, accompanied by the damning evidence I had gathered. At the same time, I sent a separate copy to the media, an anonymous tip that would ensure the scandal went public. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. It felt surreal, but in that moment I knew there was no turning back. The path I had chosen was irreversible. Whatever happened next, there would be no going back to the life I once knew. It was done. The hours that followed felt like days. My phone buzzed incessantly with messages and notifications, calls from colleagues, a few worried texts from friends, and endless emails from the media. The storm had started. I sat still, staring at my phone, watching as the world I knew began to collapse. The leak was everywhere. The company's internal chat channels were flooded with confusion, disbelief, and anger. Executives were scrambling to figure out how the information had gotten out, while department heads were furiously contacting their teams, trying to salvage what little remained of the company's reputation. I watched as the media picked up the story, and the headlines screamed, "Corporate Scandal Exposes Betrayal at Tech Giant. CEO's Trusted Manager and Head of Marketing Accused of Deceit and Manipulation." Every word stung like a blow to the gut, but in that moment I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. Veronica and Adam were no longer in control. The tables had turned. I had expected the backlash to be swift, but nothing could have prepared me for how quickly everything unraveled. The CEO called an emergency meeting with the executive team, and by morning, rumors had already begun circulating about what would happen next. Veronica and Adam were facing severe consequences, not just professional but legal as well. As the news spread, I found myself in the eye of the storm. I had no desire to watch the chaos unfold from the sidelines, so I made a decision. I would leave. I had already made my mark on the company. I had created products, built relationships, and left behind a legacy. But now there was nothing left for me there. I wasn't interested in the drama. I didn't want to be a part of the mess anymore. I packed my things, cleaned out my office, and sent my resignation letter. I wasn't going to let this betrayal define me. I wasn't going to let Veronica and Adam's greed dictate the rest of my life. Before I left, I heard whispers, rumors really, that the board was planning to fire them both. Adam would likely be arrested for the illegal manipulation of company funds. Veronica, on the other hand, was facing not only termination but a potential lawsuit from the company for her role in the sabotage. As I walked out of the building for the last time, I realized I hadn't just lost my job, I had lost my belief in the company I had worked so hard to build. All of my years of dedication had been reduced to nothing more than a series of lies. But it wasn't just about that. It was about Veronica and Adam, two people I had once trusted, destroying everything for their own gain. I closed the door behind me, stepping out into the cold Seattle evening. The city lights twinkled in the distance, but I couldn't shake the bitter taste in my mouth. My world had shattered, and yet I felt oddly calm. This was just the beginning. I had plans. And they didn't include anyone from that company. It had been a week since I walked away from the company. The world outside felt both familiar and foreign at the same time. I had spent years pouring myself into my work, never truly stepping back to examine what I wanted beyond the confines of my job. Now, with nothing but time and a raw sense of betrayal to fill the silence, I was forced to confront the reality of my life. My phone was buzzing more than ever. The media still couldn't get enough of the scandal, and I was constantly fielding calls from former colleagues, journalists, and even potential investors. Everyone wanted to know what had happened, what the next steps were for the company, and what my future plans looked like. But the truth was, I didn't know. I had no desire to dive back into the corporate world. For days, I avoided the calls, choosing instead to sit in the quiet of my apartment, staring out the window at the city I had known for so long. I had been part of the system, the one that rewarded ambition at the cost of ethics, the one that turned a blind eye to manipulation as long as the profits kept rolling in. The last few months had shown me just how deeply corrupted it all was, and I didn't want to be a part of that anymore. But there was still something inside me, something that refused to let the past define my future. The truth was, I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. I spent the next few days researching. I had no interest in going back to a traditional job, but I knew I had skills that were in demand. Technology was evolving, and with the right vision I could create something new, something that didn't rely on the flawed system I had just left behind. It was time to build something different. A company that prioritized transparency, ethics, and innovation over politics and profit. I didn't want to merely exist in the industry. I wanted to create a culture where people like me, the driven, the ambitious, could flourish without sacrificing their integrity. I started reaching out to old contacts, people I trusted, people who had the same values. One by one, I gathered a small group of like-minded individuals, each with their own expertise. We worked out of coffee shops, rented spaces, anywhere we could find, slowly piecing together our ideas and building our vision. The first few months were tough. There were countless meetings, brainstorming sessions, and late nights of coding, testing, and refining. But as the weeks passed, something incredible happened. The idea we were building started to take shape. We had a product, a new platform that combined cutting-edge technology with user-centric design. It wasn't just about making money, it was about creating something meaningful, something that could help people and businesses thrive without the toxic culture I had just escaped. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. The reality of starting a business from scratch hit us hard. Funding was a constant struggle, and we had to be creative in how we spent our limited resources. I found myself juggling tasks I never thought I would have to do again, meeting with investors, negotiating with partners, dealing with legal contracts. But through it all, the team stayed committed, driven by a shared vision that burned brighter than ever. As we worked, I found my passion reigniting. This wasn't just about escaping the past, it was about building something new, something that was mine. I could feel the weight of betrayal slowly lifting, replaced by a sense of purpose. Each small victory, a successful demo, a new partnership, a new user, felt like a step further from the life I had left behind. But I knew the road ahead would be challenging. Veronica and Adam's betrayal still lingered in my mind, and I couldn't help but wonder if I would ever fully escape their shadow. Their actions had shaped my journey, but they no longer had control over my future. I was the one in charge now, and I wasn't about to let the mistakes of the past dictate where I was going. With each day that passed, my new company began to grow. We were still small, but we were making waves in the industry. I knew the road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was on the right path. It wasn't just about proving them wrong. It was about proving to myself that I could start again, that I could rise from the ashes of my past and create something that would last. It had been nearly a year since I walked away from the company that had once been my entire life. My startup had begun to take off, its small but dedicated team working tirelessly to make our vision a reality. We were still in the early stages, but the momentum we had built felt unstoppable. With each new success, I felt a sense of validation, as though the betrayal that had once consumed me was finally starting to lose its grip. But the past had a way of catching up with you. It was a quiet Wednesday afternoon when I received a call I wasn't expecting. The name on the screen was unfamiliar, but the voice on the other end was one I'd never forget. "Daniel," the voice said, a chill in its tone. It was Adam. For a moment I said nothing. I couldn't believe he was calling. After everything that had happened, after everything he had done, I never imagined he would try to contact me. "Adam," I said, my voice steady but cold. "What do you want?" There was a brief pause on the other end of the line, and then Adam spoke again, his voice tinged with desperation. "I need to talk. I know I've messed up, but I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to explain." I had no intention of hearing him out. What explanation could he possibly offer that would change what had already happened? The betrayal was so complete, so deep, that no words from him could undo the damage. But something in his voice stopped me from hanging up. Perhaps it was curiosity, or maybe it was something else, something I hadn't quite processed. "Fine," I said, cutting through the silence. "You have 10 minutes. We arranged to meet at a small cafe downtown, the same one where Veronica and I used to go when we were just starting out. I could feel the tension building in my chest as I thought about what was about to unfold. When I arrived at the cafe, Adam was already sitting at a corner table, his face older, wearier. The sharp edge that had once been there was gone, replaced by a kind of resignation. As I sat down across from him, I couldn't help but notice how much he had changed, or maybe how much I had changed. He was no longer the confident, arrogant man I had once called a friend. Now he seemed like a shadow of himself. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he began, his eyes locked on mine. "What we did, what I did to you, there's no excuse for it. But you need to know that it wasn't all about the company. It was about me, about my own insecurities. Veronica and I, we got caught up in something that wasn't real. We let greed cloud our judgment." I listened, my arms crossed, not sure what I was waiting for. I didn't want to hear his apologies, didn't want to hear how sorry he was. But as he spoke, I felt something shift inside me. "It wasn't just the company, was it?" I asked, my voice low. "It was about more than that. It was about taking what wasn't yours, about destroying everything in your path to get ahead. You and Veronica wanted my life, Adam. My career. My success." He nodded slowly, his face tight with regret. "I know. And I'm sorry. I lost myself in it. I thought I could outsmart you, outsmart everyone. But I didn't realize the consequences of what I was doing until it was too late." I sat back in my chair, feeling a strange mix of anger and pity. I had come here expecting closure, expecting some kind of catharsis, but what I was getting was a hollow apology, a man who was too far gone to fix what he had broken. "I'm not here to make things right," Adam continued, his voice quieter now. I just wanted you to know that I see what I did. And I see what it cost me." I felt a flicker of something, maybe forgiveness, maybe something else, but I quickly pushed it aside. Adam had lost his chance to make things right long before this conversation. There was no going back. "Save it for someone else, Adam," I said, standing up. "I'm done with all of this. You and Veronica, you're not worth my time anymore." He looked up at me, his eyes filled with something between guilt and resignation, but I didn't wait to hear more. I walked out of the cafe, the door swinging shut behind me. As I stepped into the cool evening air, I felt a sense of finality wash over me. The past was behind me now, and there was nothing left to prove. Veronica and Adam had tried to destroy me, but in the end they had only made me stronger. I had built something new, something that was truly mine. My company was growing, my team was thriving, and I was no longer defined by the betrayal that had once consumed me. I had found my way back, not just to success but to myself. And as I looked toward the future, I knew one thing for certain. This time I was in control.